Right, I'd like to welcome you to our team baseline concussion testing as well as information session. Congratulations as well to your team for signing up and taking control or taking action in educating you, the parents and the athletes, on safe concussion management as well as awareness before starting your season. With your team itself, every team or league will be governed by the rules of the league that you play in or the team that you play for in terms of how specifically to manage a concussion for your own sporting group. And so there will be a separate protocol that will be presented and passed out in advance of the season, whether you need to follow up with a doctor or a certified therapist in order to get back to play. And those things will be, like I say, determined by your individual sport group and will be handed out to you either through email or paper in your preseason meeting. So look for that. What we're going to do in this video is showcase basically the absolute critical pieces that you should know so that if you do get into trouble during the season, that you have the skills, I guess, to be able to make a good decision for yourself, and obviously if you're a parent watching this, to be able to help your child make a good decision and get good awareness as to what it is that you're looking for and what to do and, of course, what not to do. So the first question is, of course, well, who are we? So we're Collegiate Sports Medicine, and we're hired by your sports team to basically start off with baseline testing. So before your season begins, we're going to, or some of you may have already started your season and you're being tested already starting to play or practice, and that's fine. Any time is good. But the baseline testing itself is actually a snapshot of your normal, and everybody's normal is different. And so some people might have really excellent balance and math skills, and other people, they're kind of crummy at it. And so to be crummy at it doesn't mean that you fail the concussion test. It just means that we're taking a snapshot of what is normal for you. And if we do that at the beginning of the season, and then, of course, if you do have an injury occur, we try to make sure and get you back to what's normal for you before we put you back on the field of play. And for some people that aren't athletes and not playing, it might be even just to get you back to school. So we at Collegiate Sports Medicine, we use a team approach, and that's why your team has come to us to work with you specifically, is because we are not only able to do the testing for you, but we're able to do the management for you afterwards. So we have a team of athletic therapists. And athletic therapists are specialized in working with athletes, but they're also specialized with, not only concussions, but knee injuries and elbow injuries and everything along the way, looking at prevention, taping, bracing strategies, and so much more. We have physiotherapists on our team. We have a vestibular therapist that can work with dizziness issues and issues with visual systems and balance, proprioception. We have kinesiologists that can help with reconditioning you after a concussion. We do have a linkage with a sport neuropsychologist who works still with the Winnipeg Jets in the National Hockey League and has been involved with developing or helping to develop the NHL concussion program. We have massage therapists that work with us that do craniosacral as well as basic massage techniques to help with restoring some of the tissue to normal as well in the neck and upper shoulders. And basically with that team approach, we feel that we can be a good asset to you and your organization. And we'll also try to work with you and your coaching staff to help to get the messages back and forth depending upon the situation or how we're set up with your team specifically. For some teams, we're more a part of your medical team than others. Other times we're just testing, and then individual athletes have to come into the clinic on their own to get treatment. Hopefully that helps. We do have a concussion hotline, and our concussion hotline is basically a number to call. You just call the clinic and you press extension 2, and that takes you to a place that you can leave a message if you have any questions. So if something happens after hours and you can't reach us, you can call in and just say, hey, I have a question, please call me. It's a free service. It's something that we give to the community as a free offering. And we won't call you back immediately, maybe, because it's obviously not an urgent phone line. The emergency department is used for that. So in the event that you're worried that you have a bleed or some kind of major injury, 911 or going to the emergency room is always your urgent line. But if you have questions about should you sleep or go to school or should I go to the emergency room, definitely call us and we'll do our best to call you back within 1 business day. And so the concussion hotline is a free service available to anybody, whether they're involved with our baseline concussion testing program or not. So to start with, the word concussion means to shake violently. So if I was to take this and literally just shake it, the word in essence just means that, is to shake violently. To concuss doesn't mean to hit. It doesn't mean that it's been bruised. So in order to get a concussion, that's basically what you have to do, is your head has to go through a shaking motion. So you could get shooken, like from the shoulders, and your head could kind of whip back and forth. You can land on your butt. So let's say you're running and you get clipped and your feet get taken out from underneath you and you land on your butt, and your kind of brain can slosh inside your skull, but nothing ever has to hit your head. You can get a concussion from that. So your brain moves inside your skull without sometimes ever having your head be contacted. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that most people think you have to get hit to the head in order to get a concussion. I want to talk right now about the difference between a concussion and a traumatic brain injury. So we have two classes. One is called a mild traumatic brain injury, and that's something that we can't see. It's an invisible injury. You can look at it, you can look at the brain, you can take x-rays and images and see inside the head and see absolutely nothing wrong. So a concussion or a mild traumatic brain injury is invisible. And basically it affects how the brain works. So the functional pieces, the speech, the coordination. And a traumatic brain injury is like a skull fracture or a bleed, where you actually have trauma that causes some physical damage to the head or the brain or the nerves or the blood vessels. And so to differentiate between that, if you have a traumatic brain injury, you need to go to the emergency room. You'll know because you'll have declining symptoms. There'll be slurred speech, vomiting, nausea, and basically the signs will be obvious because you're going to be declining. And so I'll go through that right now. That's basically detecting an emergency. So you get hit and the headache maybe comes on. It doesn't always come on in traumatic brain injuries or concussions. Sometimes people will feel nausea, or they'll actually throw up. Their words might come out funny, slurred speech. You might be like not coordinated and walking and stumbling. You might even have a seizure or be able to see properly. You might have numbness in your legs, or not be able to recognize people that you normally can recognize. Your pupils, you might have different size of pupils. One might be big and one might be little. And you might have blood or fluid coming from your ears. So pretty obvious. So please don't call a concussion hotline. Go to the emergency room or call 911. All right, so that would be more a sign of a traumatic brain injury. You would go to the hospital, they would maybe do a CT scan or an x-ray and actually see something, and then take you through the process of maybe surgery or decompression treatment and deal with that type of trauma. All right, so in the event that it ends up being a concussion, there's no way to see it. So how do you diagnose it? So what we would do is, if we or your trainers or coaches are working on the sidelines, whether it's in volleyball or hockey or football, we would try to take you through some tests, kind of like we do with your baseline testing, to try to put your brain to work. And so the best way I can explain it is let's take a car, like a sports car, a Ferrari. I don't know, I've never driven one, but it would be like a high performance race car, and the only way to test it would be on like a racetrack. And you'd take the car, you polish it up, it's in the sun, it looks great. Standing back at it, you think, wow, that must be a fast car. No different from your brain. If you just look back at it, you're like, looks good. But until you really take it for a test drive, so let's take the Ferrari, put it on the racetrack, take it out, corner it, race somebody else, that's the only way you're gonna know, is this car actually, does it work? And so to test a race car is no different than testing our brain. We've got to put it through its paces to see how does it work. So we test all the different things that it does. So with a concussion, if you're on the sidelines, we can't just look at you and say, you good? How do you feel? We actually have to say, can you add the numbers? Can you recognize people? Can you remember things? And that's how we're going to challenge the brain, not only during baseline testing, but also after a hit. And the cool part about our brain is that it's pretty adaptive. It's designed to take hits. It's designed to bump it on things. And so don't worry, like if you bump your head here and there, you don't think you have a concussion either. Don't be worried. Our brains are very well suited to get bumped around a little bit because we'll hit them on cupboard doors and getting out of the vehicle sometimes. But what you want to watch for is if you get hit, whether it's in sport or in real life, that you don't feel right, you don't feel normal. Okay, so we want you to go ahead and envision that basically it's like a sprained ankle even. You sprain your ankle and it feels pretty good. Not great, but it feels pretty good the first day. And then by the next day you wake up and you can hardly move it. It swells up, and so the brain is no different. So we're going to get maybe hit in the field of play, and it's going to not feel right. And so you have to think no different than the ankle. It's probably at its best right now. It's probably going to get worse because as things swell and kind of change a bit, we don't know how bad it's going to get. So a lot of coaches will come and say, hey, you know, Mel, like, you know, can they play? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, we've got to wait and see how it responds in the next half an hour, the next hour, even the next 24 hours, and see how that injury actually kind of takes over or doesn't. Sometimes things go okay. So what we're looking at nowadays is basically to say we can't diagnose a concussion on the field immediately. We can say a person might have one, but we can't say they don't. So if you get hit hard enough in a certain way that causes things to be changed, we have to call it a concussion. And we can't say you're cleared to play until we've waited at least 24 hours to see how's it going. So don't kind of be shy to tell your trainer or your coach that you got hit. But they're going to hopefully have a trainer that has background in concussion management on the sidelines to be able to say, let's just take it slow, let's spend a few minutes and do some testing. And if there's any decline at all in your symptoms or how you add numbers together or what your balance is like, then we're going to pull you from play and wait until the next day to be able to say yes or no. So that takes us to the emergency room. What if you go to the emergency room right away? What should the doctor be able to do right then and there? They can tell you if you have a traumatic brain injury, because they'll be able to find that. But they won't be able to tell you you don't have a concussion. And so in international sporting circles with the Olympic medical teams, in the NHL and the NFL and the CFL, we basically tell athletes yes to go to the hospital, but not to say if they do or don't have a concussion. Because if a doctor writes, do not have a concussion, within the first 24 hours, we have to rip that up and throw it out anyways because we don't know, they can't tell until the next day either. And so it could just be that they're not informed, that it takes that long, I'm not sure, or that they're more concerned about a traumatic brain injury. So I think it's really important to just be informed yourself and know why you're going to the hospital. All right, so in terms of prevention, when we look at basically ways to not get a concussion, let's even start there. Why get a concussion in the first place? So if we wanted to lessen the severity of a concussion or the likelihood of getting one of the best ways is to strengthen the neck muscles. And women, believe it or not, are not as strong in the neck as men are, and so often we're a little bit more susceptible to concussion or more severe concussion if we're in a motor vehicle accident or if we're playing rugby or football or something and we get kind of hit. Our heads are heavy, and then as we get tackled or we hit something, our head keeps moving and our neck muscles have to stop our head from moving. And so if our head whips really quickly or we get hit and we didn't see it coming, then the head will whip faster. And the faster the whipping, the more the brain will slosh kind of inside of our skull. And so for men, I guess inherently they're a little bit stronger and maybe a little bit more safeguarded because of the strength of the neck. But also, if you're playing a contact sport, you need to work on neck strengthening intentionally. Like wrestlers do a really good job of neck strengthening as a part of their training program, and I think football can do a better job. You're putting on a heavy helmet, and and it creates a lot of extra momentum when you're tackling. So basically, the next thing would be being dialed in. Like if you're that athlete that's out there and you're kind of chasing butterflies and not really paying attention, and heck, you might not even want to be out there at all. You might be distracted because of something going on at home. Then really you shouldn't be playing, because if you're not focused on the game and you get hit, you're basically going to have that same quicker whiplash motion. So your athlete that's really ready and dialed in and focused and really almost a slight, not higher aggression level, but just a lot more focused on the game, is actually safeguarded from concussion because you have your core activated, your legs are ready, you're in general, you're ready to take a hit and deliver a hit in the event that it's a contact sport. So that's really important for prevention as well. So for hydration, if you're optimally hydrated or drinking a lot of water or the right amount of water, you'll know that because your urine is running clear. If you're going to the bathroom right before a game and it's really bright yellow, it probably means you're a little bit dehydrated. So that's really the best way to know if you're hydrated. But if you're dehydrated, then your brain doesn't have the same cushioning around it to be able to support it. And so there's a lot of research on that. And the other thing is dehydration will be linked to reaction time or poor reaction time and sluggish brain function. And so if your reaction time is off, then also you're going to be susceptible to any kind of injury, like an ankle or a knee injury as well. So to be optimally hydrated is good for a lot of reasons. Plus performance will be enhanced or optimized because your muscle function will be better, stronger, more power output, as well as more fatigue resistant. So you can get through a game without as much fatigue. Electrolytes are also important for that, and they actually have done some research to show that taking in some electrolytes, like one or maybe half a bottle of Gatorade after a concussion, can actually be a really, really smart move in helping to lessen the severity of a concussion. And so there's no problem doing that as long as you're okay to be taking Gatorade. There's a lot of questions about mouth guards. Do they work or do they help at all? A mouth guard is not really going to lessen the severity of a concussion because usually your brain is going to be moving around inside your skull regardless. But if you get a blow that's delivered to your jaw, then it can lessen the amount of force that's transmitted through your teeth if you get the right kind of hit, but pretty rare to get that. Otherwise, a mouth guard will reduce the chance of breaking teeth, and there's certainly value there. So it lessens your dental bills and insurance costs and all of that. So really, we do want you to wear a mouth guard, but it isn't going to have a huge prevention piece. One of the things that we do ask, though, is that if you're wearing a mouth guard, that if you bite down on it, if you're making a contact or you're getting hit, by biting down on it, it allows the deep neck flexors to contract a little bit. And with that, it helps to stabilize the head and reduce that whipping motion. So maybe the mouth guard itself might not reduce concussion severity, but the clenching down on it gently can certainly help. And I mentioned being ready and being aware and being, wanting and willing to play. So definitely get out of your sport if you're playing and you're not really interested in it. All right, so we want to talk a little bit about symptoms. What does a concussion look like? So now you're maybe out in the field and you start to, kind of get bumped around a little bit, and you start to, kind of maybe feel a little bit off or dizzy or headachy, and that's all, that's all good. But you're kind of wondering, well, what are the list of symptoms? This is actually, I know it's a long list, but this list of symptoms there are 22 things on it. And it only takes one thing on this list to count as a concussion. So you could just be sad, like normal. Normally you're not sad, but all of a sudden if you're appearing sad, or maybe you don't feel right, or you're in a fog and you just kind of, your vision doesn't seem right. Neck pain, you could have pressure in your head. You could be a little bit irritable, and normally you're not irritable. So it's really, the list is pretty long, and it'll be in your concussion info package. And it's basically a baseline testing package that you all will have. It'll either be emailed to you or handed out during your seminar. But the actual list is really there to kind of guide you. In other words, everybody's concussion is going to look different. We talk about a concussion being like a snowflake. Every snowflake is different. I can't tell you what yours is going to look like, and I can't tell you how long it's going to take to go away. So one person might present with just dizziness, and that's it. So we're not going to say, oh, you don't have 3 symptoms, you don't have a concussion. It is either you have one of the symptoms and it's different than normal, or you don't. Okay, so years ago we used to have grades of concussion, like mild, moderate, or severe, or like a grade 1, 2, or 3, or whatever. All of those concussion grading systems are out the window now. And the reason being is that sometimes you'll have an athlete that'll get knocked unconscious, and we call that a severe concussion, or we used to call that a severe concussion. But then all of a sudden that athlete would wake up 2 minutes later or 30 seconds later and feel fine. Good memory, good reaction time, no issues with speech, headache, nothing. And be back to play within a couple days. So then you can have another athlete that lands on their butt, feels fine, gets a bit of a headache that lasts for 2 years. So we can kind of say, well, it sounds like the kid that didn't actually get knocked unconscious actually has a worse concussion because the symptoms lingered. And so really you either have a concussion or you don't. Because if we say, oh, the guy that has got knocked unconscious has a grade 3 or severe concussion, then you freak him out and think, man, you're never going to get better. But the reality is like, really we don't know how long it could take. So by giving somebody a grade, usually helps to kind of give some guidance as to how long or what the recovery process is going to look like. So we don't know what your concussion is going to look like, and we don't know how long it's going to take to get better. Your concussion is yours, and it's going to look like it looks. And when your symptoms are gone, your concussion is recovered. How many concussions you've had in the past. So if you've had 3 or 4 before, it might make your next concussion more difficult to recover from. You might have your first concussion ever, and it's a career-ending injury because of the way it happened. 10 years ago, I heard doctors say, oh, 3 concussions and you're out. It was just this 3 concussion rule. We don't do that anymore either, because some people, you can get a mild concussion. Mild, see, I just said the wrong thing. You can have a concussion that has mild symptoms and you get back to play right away within a week. And if you do everything perfectly, there's no proof in the literature that shows us that there's any detriment to getting back to contact sport. So we can safely return to contact sport, maybe get another concussion, heal completely. There are records of people that have 20, 30 concussions and have safely continued to play for a long, long time. So we can't tell you how many concussions is the right number to have. It could be 1, it could be 30. The idea though is that you take every concussion, you treat it seriously, you try to use the information that I'm going to still give you here today in terms of what to do, and ideally you recover as optimally as you can, and then make a decision whether or not you have any deficits and whether or not it's safe to return. Everybody's going to have different risk factors. One of the risk factors is previous concussion. Another one is ADHD, depression, anxiety. Those types of pre-existing kind of psychological scenarios present us with a difficulty to get people better. The reason is that if you're that person that's maybe just a little bit hyperactive, or your brain is just working overtime thinking about stuff, it's hard to rest a brain that's trying to heal. It's like going for a run on a swollen ankle. You can't let it rest if you're continuing to use it. So to try to shut off a really active brain is difficult if you're worried about, is this going to be a long-standing injury? And so we try to work really hard with people that have that high stress anxiety trait to just calm them down, but it'll still usually take a little bit longer to get them better. People that are in that adolescent stage, they usually take longer to get better than an adult because their brains are developing and growing at a really, really fast rate. Young children, believe it or not, recover very well, way better than adolescents do. So we have to look at the whole picture. So if you were to come into the clinic and ask a therapist, we can't just say, hey, this is how it goes, like how many concussions, how bad was it, that kind of thing. So recognizing a concussion, basically we're watching it for the first at least 24 hours because we don't know how bad is it going to get. Is there swelling that's going to develop overnight and then into the next day even. All right, so early management of a concussion. So as soon as you have been pulled out of sport, we ask that you get the heck out of there. In other words, you're not going to stand on the sidelines and cheer on your team because there's a whole bunch of noise in the arena and your brain has to process that noise. Your coach is looking over at you all mad because you're not playing, and that stresses you out. You got grandma and grandpa and your mom and dad and brothers in the stands, and they're bummed because they drove from Saskatchewan and they want to watch you play, and all of that is really, really hard on you. So you know what? You just need to go and you need to get out of there and start your healing process. The whistles and the blowing horns and cheering, it's all processing through your brain and slowing down the healing. As soon as you get injured, your healing process starts immediately. So you want to have the best chance to get back as quickly as you can. So you owe it to your team and to yourself to heal properly. So get home and get resting. The question comes a lot, should I go to the emergency room? Well, if you answered no to all those questions before, you don't have declining symptoms, slurred speech, blurred vision, you're not nauseous, you're not throwing up, your symptoms are stable, they're not that bad, and they're maybe even getting a little bit better, then you should go home and be monitored by your family or a friend and just stay there. What the literature is showing us now is the emergency room is ridiculously stressful. There's not good access to rest, food, water, a place to lie down. And all the extra processing of information in the emergency room can actually be detrimental to your healing as well. So if we recommend food, hydration, water, sleep, dark places, then home is where you should be, and monitoring your symptoms and seeing that they're getting better. If you're at all worried though, please just go to the emergency room and then be evaluated. But try to take maybe some dark sunglasses, put some earbuds in just to block some extra noise, just to kind of take away some of the extra stimulus. Don't take a book or a cell phone. Don't be reading anything while you're there. You shouldn't be at practice the next day. You definitely shouldn't go to school. Even if it's just mild symptoms, just take the next day off and recover. I don't care if it's a final exam. I don't care if it's, something really, really important. You really just owe it to yourself to just take it easy. And so at least that 24 hours. Shouldn't have any friends over, no video games, no loud music. Try to put your cell phone away, but don't feel punished. A lot of us, we live with our cell phone and we just can't live without it. So don't think that, your parents or myself were punishing you and taking away your cell phone. It isn't that. It's just that by being on it, you're thinking and you're looking at stuff and processing information. So you'll want to, be in touch with your friends though. So, maybe give yourself a couple minutes an hour. Go grab your phone if you need to send a message to somebody or check in with somebody, because it's nice to still stay in touch. But please be really careful with that. For those of you over 18, I don't want you drinking any alcohol or taking any medication. The worst medication to take is aspirin or ibuprofen. Those are the blood thinners. So if you do actually have a traumatic brain injury, it could be bleeding in there. We don't want to make the bleeding worse. We want it to just stabilize and clot. So if you do go to the emergency room and they recommend that you take some Tylenol, that's fine. And the reason is that it lessens your headache. It lessens the pain that you feel. And that's really, really important because you don't want to have pain for no reason. If you don't have a bleeding injury and there's nothing really going on in there other than maybe just some functional stuff, then take a bit of Tylenol, but take it at the direction of your care team or your doctor. Those of you that are able to drive or old enough to drive, it isn't because it's like I'm worried that you're a bad driver. I don't want you to drive because your reaction time is maybe poor or off. We don't know. And all of a sudden now you're maybe not as good with that and you might be a hazard on the road. And the other thing is if you've ever been driving and you're in traffic in Calgary during rush hour, it can give you a headache because there's so much, you're looking and you're turning and you're trying to process information. And so just don't do that to yourself, it's silly. But if you're driving the next day somewhere that it's a familiar road, it's really easy to do, then I would say it's probably okay as long as your symptoms are really, really mild. Things that you should do is you should not go to practice or games. I mentioned that. Begin the rest right away. Call the hotline, the concussion hotline here at the clinic, and it's 403-314-4458, and it'll go through the prompt. So you can just listen for the hotline. Take a sleep or a nap as much as you want in the first couple days. That's totally fine. And then get back to your normal sleeping routine after that. Like I said, use sunglasses or earbuds without being hooked to any music, just to try to deaden the sound and light that's coming in. And if you do have a bit of stiffness in your neck, then you can go ahead and put an ice pack on to try to lessen any muscle strain that you might have gotten from that. And it can also help to take away a bit of a headache if it's coming from a neck strain. And the next couple of things are kind of interesting is grooming. If you're like, you sprain your ankle, you blow your knee, you're all bummed, you're just like in a funk. You don't want to go to school, you just want to sit on the couch and eat ice cream. Well, that's not good for your mental health. That doesn't make you feel good to be all grubby in your sweatpants. So if you go and have a shower and put on a nice shirt, it'll actually change your mood. And believe it or not, that actually helps with concussion healing and management. So I do want you to brush your teeth and get good food in, and all of that will help you as well. And try to stay in a familiar environment, somewhere with low light and quiet. All right, so the next little bit that I wanted to talk about is what happens after that. Basically, we have what's called a 7-stage return to play plan. And so the first day is just rest, just chill, take it easy, do the things I mentioned. And then we're gonna go ahead and after 24 hours, if things are really, really settled, we'll give you some direction as to whether to start exercise or not. But exercise is really, really important in the healing process. Even if you have a few symptoms, we'll usually start a bit of easy walking or riding on a bike or walking on a treadmill, that kind of thing. And so we can kind of take you through that. So there are tips in the concussion handbook that we've handed out as well. And then it'll give you a few things that you can do in the next couple days. And then we'll go into light exercise, more intense weightlifting, or if you're not an athlete, you can get into some reading and some cognitive work, which we want you to do anyways for both athletes and non-athletes. You're going to do exercise and cognitive work. We'll look at reaction time, balancing exercises, and it's about a 7-day process to get you back if you've had some symptoms that's taken you out of your sport. And so once we kind of get back, if your sports or your sports group or your team requires you to see a doctor to get back to the field of play, then once we've returned you to level 6, which is full intense practice with the non-contact, and if you're still doing well and you don't have symptoms and everything's going well, then we would get the final return to play either from a certified athletic therapist like myself or a physiotherapist trained specifically with concussion management or a physician trained with concussion management. Some of the stuff that we will or can do in the clinic. The first thing is we're going to repeat your baseline test and compare it with your norm. And then ideally when you're ready to return to football or hockey or whatever your sport is, we're going to do another baseline test. So basically it gives you a new normal in case it's changed a little bit. And then we can have that on file as well for future. So again, talk to your team, specifically your managers and coaches, for your own specific team protocols. And at the end of your baseline testing, you will get a baseline testing record, which is basically like a record that you were tested today. Whether or not we're using just the balance testing and memory and all of that, or if we're also using a computerized neurocognitive test, that'll be recorded specifically on your record card to say what testing we did. And we'll keep a record of it at the clinic as well. So if you're going to a different team or something to play and they need the testing records, we can always forward them with your permission. And the last thing, if you're from out of town, maybe you don't even play the sport in this town and we've got your testing results and you want to go for therapy at a different clinic, that's fine. Just call us, get your baseline testing records, and you can take them there so you can be managed elsewhere where it works better for you. Thank you.